Yeah, I'll first start also by explaining like the type of neurodivergence I have. I have misophonia. It's a rare neurological sound processing disorder where some normal sounds cause an extreme panic, stress, fear response in my brain. Um, so my experiences are normal for the most part, but trigger sounds can happen anywhere, anytime. Um, and by far my I've had most of my negative experiences with housing, most of my troubles with housing. Um, Another important thing about misophonia is it's impossible to ignore the noises. If I try to, it often makes noises louder. Um, However, most of the time, this can just be solved with like noise canceling headphones, like I have. They're incredibly helpful for me. And 99% of the time, it blocks out the noise, and I just keep noise canceling on until the noise goes away, or stops, or yeah. However, if the noise gets through somehow, or if like it persists, or if I like don't have my AirPods, then it can cause intense distress. It's like a fight or flight type response. Um, so when I lived on campus, that's where I faced most of my difficulties, like my dorm. I had a roommate and she got this ice machine. Um, and when she would leave it on at night, I would experience insomnia, really severe panic attacks, as well as suicidal thoughts. Um, and Another experience I had at OU in the dorms was my neighbors would party and play music and talk and whatnot at night. And it went on for about 2 months of every night them doing this. And because my misophonia, it I experienced like a loss of sleep, regular panic attacks, and a rapid decline in mental health. My grades were affected as well. But it can cause like suffering to a life-altering degree. It can affect interpersonal relationships, housing and career prospects, as well as like generally worsen mental health. So while it is kind of like difficult, I guess, to draw a correlation between like just a noise, uh, it is something that can affect people with misophonia very, very deeply. I'll experience it while like studying or in a classroom, but generally those are solvable. It's in the spaces where it's more informal, or I spend a lot more time there, like a dorm, where it's more of an issue. In the classroom, occasionally I will be triggered by a student who is chewing gum, eating, drinking, um, something like that. And most of the time, I will just put in my AirPods and put on noise canceling and be fine. Um, the nice thing about the noise canceling that these have is it filters out like background sounds, but I can still hear the lecture. So usually I'll be able to hear the professor. It'll just be much more muffled and it'll filter out the trigger sound. So sometimes it won't filter out the trigger sound, which I'll play music and just watch the lecture, which I think is better than leaving. And then on rare occasions, this hasn't happened often, but it has happened before where the professor will trigger my misophonia, um, in which I will do the same thing, essentially put my headphones in, start playing music, and just watch the lecture. The main challenge is when professors uh, or teachers tell me to take them out. Um, and it's not something I've ever really explained to a teacher or professor because it's hard to talk about and explain. But that's sort of where I experience the most challenge. Um, And if it does happen, I usually just go to the bathroom to try and like take a break and recuperate before going back to class and trying to stick it out. Um, but for the most part, it's not as bad in the classroom, except also test taking is difficult. If I'm taking a test and my misophonia is triggered, that happened recently in an exam. Um, and at that point, I just kind of have to stick it out. Not in that context, but I have talked with a professor about my misophonia because while I was going through that whole 2 month period where my grades were slipping and like my mental health was really bad, I talked to my one professor and it explained everything uh, in the context of why I had been turning in assignments late, and she was very understanding about it. So it's it's more of a it's difficult to talk about thing personally because um and I know this is common for a lot of other people with misophonia too, where people get irritated that you get irritated um, and have this reaction because they don't understand it. And it becomes a thing where they kind of blame you, which can lead to a lot of isolation. Um, it's very common, especially within the families of people with misophonia. Like I know several people who've gone through it, so it's difficult to talk about in the first place. You also don't want to feel abnormal. Like it's just difficult. And I guess that's where understanding neurodivergence and being more accepting towards that could help bridge that gap of communication to make it less difficult. Definitely. When a professor is more lenient about headphones, than that, or permits them, then that is a huge, huge thing that makes it much easier. Um, uh, no, like eating and drinking or chewing gum policies might help mitigate trigger sounds, but often I've found that students just do it more subtly. So I just uh, really appreciate it when professors have like permit headphones or have like a quiet period while doing work or something is sometimes nice. Um, really just less strict rules and more understanding around like headphones. I guess two main things. The first thing I would like them to know is that it's sometimes difficult to make your needs known if you're neurodivergent. Reaching out and like communicating those is difficult. So adding on to that, anything that they can do to um, make it known there is an open avenue of communication and there is understanding for students who may have different learning needs goes a long way. Empathy, understanding, um, all that makes a huge, huge difference. Um, Especially if you're able to talk with a professor one-on-one after class instead of like in front of other people